we are not in optimal market conditions for most people. We have challenges of affordability now with higher interest rates that, started creeping up in 2022 and they haven't come back down. I mean, everybody was kind of in this, well, they'll come back down by, 24 and 25. And that hasn't happened. And here we are. Yes, I know the year 2026. And, a lot of other things associated with owning a home have gotten less affordable, right? Taxes have gone up because property values have gone up as a result of the pandemic boom. Insurance is certainly a challenge. Homeowners association dues, monthly condo association dues have become, more challenging. And so people that are in their existing homes are feeling the pain, let alone buyers who now are looking at, maybe what they originally were looking at in 2021 to buy, and they decided to sit on the sidelines. The interest rates moved, and so they can't even afford what they were originally trying to do. And so you have a whole lot of people feeling stuck right now. This is the Real Estate Reckoning podcast. Welcome to the Real Estate Reckoning podcast. I'm Cara Ameer, alongside my podcast partner in crime, Mr. Scott Cramer, the PhD of all things real estate.
That's me.
And before we get started, let's explain, Scott, for our audience, what does PhD stand for our purposes?
People, homes, and disclosures. That's what we talk about on the podcast.
We sure are. And so tell us, who is the Real Estate Reckoning podcast for?
It's for the consumer. It's for the seller. It's for the buyer, somebody that's thinking of selling or buying. It's to kind of give you the behind the scenes of what happens every day in the real estate market, because not everybody buys and sells properties every day like we do. They'll do it every 7, 10, 12 years. Things change quickly in our industry.
And so our real estate industry itself has undergone a tremendous amount of change, aka reckoning, within the last 5 and 6 years. And as a 40-plus year veteran of the industry between you and me, our experiences combined, we got into it in the early 2000s. This is not the same business as when we started. And so what has changed?
A ton. Our industry went through a tremendous reckoning starting in 2019 with class action lawsuits that actually was decided where our industry lost the class action lawsuit in October of 2023. And by law, we had until August of 2024 to implement all of the new changes. So here we are in July of 2024, almost August. It's been 24 months of challenges, difficulties, change in the industry for us as agents, us as an industry, which is then transferred over to the customer level. Contracts on the listing side have been bifurcated. So the compensation that the seller would normally agree to sell their house, the seller commission, the buyer commission was all combined. That's now been divided out or bifurcated. So seller pays their listing agent compensation, and now the buyer has to have an agreement, a buyer broker agreement with their agent, and they agreed on a compensation amount. And now that contract is sent to the seller when there's an offer saying, this is what my compensation is, and I would like you to pay that compensation in our offer. That's a total change in the industry, because prior to that, for 40 or 50 years, it was the old way. And today, it's the new way. So it's created a reckoning.
Yeah, I mean, compensation was published on the multiple listing service. Buyers could work with an agent without any written agreement in place, right? If they called up and said, I want to see this house, an agent ran out to show them the home. And, whether or not that agent had any protections in place to get paid, well, whatever. Too bad, so sad if that, consumer didn't end up using them. Now it's a whole different game. You can't just contact an agent and go run and look at a house. You have to sit down with that agent. You have to have what's called a buyer consultation. They have to go through the process of everything that's going to be involved as a buyer, from getting pre-approved for a loan, what the, search criteria entails, what the offer process looks like, what the financial commitments and obligations are going to be along the way in that contract with respect to paying for an appraisal and inspections and all of that. And you have to sign a written agreement that has to be specific. It has to define the terms, the search. And in the state of California, it's law. It's not law in every state. It's a law in many states, although it is a national practice change that is required. I mean, I'm licensed in Florida and it's required there as well. And agents cannot be working with buyers without a written agreement in place, and they cannot ultimately get paid without that. They can't request compensation from a seller, even though all compensation is negotiable and who pays it, without that agreement. So that is central to everything. And that has been a 360-degree change for sure in our business. And, here we are, gosh, it's hard to believe we're, almost 2 years into this, and it's just a new normal, but it's still a very different normal than what we were used to. So
Yeah,
let's
and
talk
the big
about,
part,
go
what you
ahead.
mentioned is the change. The compensation used to be in the MLS, and nationally it changed. You can no longer have it in the MLS. So in the old contracts, when they submitted an offer, the compensation was set by the seller in the beginning and it was in the MLS. There was no negotiation of that. Now, with the bifurcation of the contracts, it is negotiable. And that buyer compensation is negotiable throughout the contract, not just acceptance of the offer, because you can have negotiations in repair requests and so forth, and that is still open where you can renegotiate that compensation.
Exactly. So a lot of moving parts with this for sure. And, there's still the challenge of, okay, the buyer and their agent agree on compensation. And, the seller doesn't have to pay that. They don't have to offer anything. It's completely negotiable. So the buyer still, because of that buyer representation agreement, may have some responsibility and some skin in the game to pay their agent, just like the seller is responsible for paying their agent, which is accomplished with a listing agreement.
Actually, they do. I mean, when we have buyer consultation meetings, we explain to the buyer, ultimately, you are responsible for the buyer agent compensation. It's actually the buyer broker compensation because the broker gets paid and then the broker pays the agent. So ultimately, they're responsible for that number. And the seller has a choice to either pay the compensation, pay part of the compensation, or no compensation. So if it's not the first one, it's negotiable between the seller and that buyer broker. And if there's ever a difference between what they're going to pay, ultimately the buyer has to make up the difference to their buyer broker based on that agreement.
Exactly. And that's a point of discussion between the buyer's agent and their buyer at the time they sit down for the purpose of this consultation. So moving on, let's talk about, besides the lawsuits, the new rules of real estate. I mean, there's just been so many things going on because of the industry changes. We've had consolidation. We've had disruption. We've had mergers. We've had acquisitions. We've had partnerships. And there's a whole lot of noise out there, portal wars. Talk to us about what we're seeing with all of that.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of this stuff that goes on in our industry is invisible to the consumer. I mean, it's affecting us as agents and brokerages on the inside of the envelope of our industry. Yeah, I mean, there's portal wars between Zillow and Redfin, and you can go down the list. And then there's brokerage consolidation. I mean, we were consolidated because Compass International Holdings ended up picking up Anywhere Brands, which is our parent company out of New Jersey. And Anywhere Brands owns Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, ERA, Century 21, Better Homes and Gardens. There's about 9 different brands that they picked up and folded up into, their camp. And then recently, EXP Realty picked up Next Home, which is a franchise across the country. And in the last 60, 90 days, Real Brokerage acquired Remax. So all these legacy brands have been rolled up into these large corporations, a lot of consolidation. So not only did we have lawsuits in our industry that we've had to redo forms and understand how to do business differently, now we have different ownership telling us what to do. A lot of changes on the agent brokerage side and somewhat very invisible to the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, every day it's another headline, and I expect we'll probably see more consolidation to follow for sure, because we're just in that kind of market. So there's also this thing called portal wars going on, right? There's battles with homes.com, Zillow.com, the battle over private listings and seller choice. And again, this noise may be invisible somewhat to the consumer, but it's very much been in the front headlines of our industry. And so what does that mean? I mean, we have, our parent company, Compass International Holdings, certainly has been taking the lead on, seller choice and really leveraging the strength of, hey, the brokerage owns that listing. Without the agent bringing that listing to the brokerage, there is no content. There's no content for these portals. And the portals have taken our listings and they have sold the listing leads we otherwise would have gotten on our listings, right, to agents paying buku bucks for zip codes and territories. And so when the consumer over the years clicks, I want more information on this house, or click to schedule a showing, they get barraged by all these agents that have paid for this zip code. The consumer has no idea what's going on. Why am I getting bombarded with 55 agents blowing up my phone with texts and, phone calls? All I want to do is see the house. And the thing is, none of those agents know the property because they're not the listing agent. And the consumer really doesn't know that. So let's talk about the portal wars and everything going on in the battle for listing data.
Yeah, so the consumer never really has understood in the broad scope of things that Zillow and Redfin and these different portals, they are selling advertising to buyers agents. And like you said, there could be 3 or 4 buyers agents that are part of a particular area or a zip code that they're subscribing to. So they're paying a fee to these portals. Um, so when the consumer clicks on, I want to see the house or know more about the house, that's when they get the phone calls from possibly multiple agents. And you're right, they're not the listing agent, they're the buyer's agent. So what's happening through the consolidation, the portal wars, everything we're talking about, the brokerages are trying to take back the information rather than, just putting it out there on the Zillows of the world. Um, they're trying to keep that information more in-house so that when a consumer calls, they're contacting the listing agent, which knows the best about the client, the house, the location, et cetera. So it's really a data play that's going on in the industry that's, again, invisible to the customer. So there's litigation between, one brokerage and one portal and back and forth. And of course, we read about it in the news every single day. And it's like, I mean, so much going on, but we have to be aware of what's going on because if the consumer says, hey, I heard XYZ, we need to be able to answer the questions. But it is a little bit overwhelming in the last 24 months, what we've had to digest as people in the industry.
And really, to the everyday consumer, I mean, what does this mean? I mean, sellers should have a choice. I mean, I do believe, everybody has a different situation and, it doesn't happen often, but there are situations where a seller has some privacy concerns. Maybe they have a, special situation going on with regard to health or other things, safety and security, and they don't want to be out there for public consumption. And so I think through this entire debate, our industry, we just want a way to be able to still be able to effectively market a seller's property that doesn't want to be necessarily on the MLS and syndicated to thousands of websites. And, that typically hadn't been, allowed. But I think it's about giving that seller that choice and making them aware of the options and saying, hey, one option available to you is this. You don't have to go on the market. You don't have to eat up days on market. We can just broadcast it within, our family of brokerages, for example. Many MLSs are getting on board with this too, and they are allowing listings to go in MLS that will not be syndicated across the board so that all agents in the MLS are aware of it, but it just doesn't, become public knowledge. And that's okay too, because I feel like, as a real estate advisor, we're not a public information service. I mean, for too long, I feel like the consumer just, again, they go on the portal, they click on the listing, they expect an agent to show up, 20 minutes later, and that's all that agents have been used for. And they're not being used for context, insight, advice, the things that the portals can't tell you, the things that the internet can't tell you. It can't really tell you, the neighborhood scuttlebutt that the agent knows, maybe why people are moving in and out of this neighborhood. They only stay 2 or 3 years. The internet can't tell you that. Portals can't tell you that. So I think it's, again, the broader debate of taking back our data and sellers having the choice and us having flexibility with the consumer and how they want to market their home. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And it can start out as a private listing, and then it can move into other phases if they want. And it's a safe way to do it. And some people are more comfortable taking baby steps based on their situation. Others want to just dive into the pool, and that's fine. We have options to fit everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the MLS was always set up as a brokerage cooperative. We cooperate with other brokers and agents. And once it went to the portals, it's changed. And you talk about consolidation. Uh, there's 480 MLSs across the United States, too expensive to manage. The two largest that are in the United States right now is CRMLS, which is California Regional MLS. And then in the Southeast and the Northeast, there's Bright MLS. These cover about 100,000 agents each. So you got 200,000 agents out of 1.4 million agents that are controlled by, two major MLSs. So there's going to be a lot more MLSs that are going to consolidate into each other. There's been talk about we need a national MLS, which I don't believe is going to work. Maybe we have regional MLSs where maybe there's 5, 6, 7 regionals. There could be 25 MLSs, but that's more consolidation that's coming in our industry. Again, very invisible to the customer, but it's something that we have to deal with as agents. So when's it all going to stop?
I don't think it's ever going to stop, do you?
I'd like it to slow down, I tell you that.
Yeah. But, we have to stay on the forefront because consumers read headlines. They come to us and they say, what does this all mean? And we need to be able to present it in a way that they understand and so that they, can leverage the benefit from all these different options that, are now taking place. Look, it's 2025. It's not 2015. And so the multiple listing
Actually, it's
services.
2026.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. So, these MLS services need to evolve. The multiple listing services do need to evolve with the way things are today. And things are moving so fast with AI, and we'll see what comes next. I mean, we're talking about the way home searches have changed. It's not just 3 bedrooms, 2 baths in this area. It's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. And I want to be walkable to XYZ coffee shop and XYZ restaurant and XYZ dog park.
Correct. The consumer is using AI, and we look at it, explaining it to a consumer just for the viewers. Think of a funnel. A funnel is wide at the top and it's narrow at the bottom. And so when your property is listed, it's at the top of the funnel, and all the buyers are there looking at the top of the funnel, and then they actually filter down the properties for their parameters they're looking for to the middle of the funnel, and they start analyzing a certain number of properties in an area, or maybe side-by-side cities. So I'll be simplistic in the search where they have 6 homes that they've chosen out of many that they've looked for. And those are in the middle of the funnel. They can now take those 6 homes, put them into AI and do the analysis on that based on what their needs and wants are. And 3 will fall into the bottom of the funnel. Those are the 3 that they're going to make appointments to look at and whether they look at the property, all three of them make an offer, or they decide on those three. They might take those three and put them back into AI, and it delivers, two into the bottom of the funnel. Those are the two they're going to focus on. They're going to make an offer on one or both of those. And that's where it's going today. And that's where it is with customers in the AI funnel.
Exactly. And we're going to be seeing a lot of changes, on top of that. And, on top of everything we've been talking about between the lawsuits, the mergers, the acquisitions, the consolidation, the portal wars, seller choice, we're dealing with a market reckoning, right? I mean, we are not in optimal market conditions for most people. We have challenges of affordability now with higher interest rates that, started creeping up in 2022 and they haven't come back down. I mean, everybody was kind of in this, well, they'll come back down by, 24 and 25. And that hasn't happened. And here we are. Yes, I know the year 2026. And, a lot of other things associated with owning a home have gotten less affordable, right? Taxes have gone up because property values have gone up as a result of the pandemic boom. Insurance is certainly a challenge. Homeowners association dues, monthly condo association dues have become, more challenging. And so people that are in their existing homes are feeling the pain, let alone buyers who now are looking at, maybe what they originally were looking at in 2021 to buy, and they decided to sit on the sidelines. The interest rates moved, and so they can't even afford what they were originally trying to do. And so you have a whole lot of people feeling stuck right now. And sellers, well, you know this very well, Scott, and we will get into this on future episodes. I mean, sellers are having to bear the reality that the market may not want to pay what their house is listed for. And we're seeing this, we're seeing multiple price reductions over time. It's like a very painful process of, slightly trying to rip the Band-Aid off a wound instead of just ripping it off. So they're just making little cut after cut after cut, and then nothing's happening. And then they may take it off the market. Then they may put it back on the market 2 or 3, months later and try to kind of trick the system. And it's a long, slow, painful death to get your home sold, right? And then you have a whole cadre of sellers that are just giving up. They're delisting their
It's death by
houses.
1,000 cuts, right?
Exactly.
So I
Yeah,
did
I
want to
mean,
mention something that a lot of people may not understand is it's a 1 to 10 ratio. What that means is if interest rates go up 1%, it decreases a buyer's purchasing power by 10%. So it has an inverse effect. If interest rates go down 1%, it increases the purchasing power by 10%. And I explain this to sellers all the time, when I'm sitting with them, is interest rates right now are like 6.6%. So it's decreasing the amount of buyers that may be able to afford your house. And you said it earlier, it's not only the monthly payment, it's the taxes and the insurance. And in California, and possibly a lot of other places around the country, is homeowners insurance is doubled and sometimes tripled. So, if it was $1,000 a year, now it could be $3,000 a year. If it was $3,000, it might be $6,000. There's some fire zones that I've sold houses where the insurance was $12,000 to $14,000 a year. It's a big expense on top of the $2.5 million price point that they're going to pay. So it's a challenge.
yeah. I mean, obviously, in light of the fires that have happened in California, insurance has really pulled back and everything is virtually in a fire zone today. And there's some new overlays and restrictions that have come into place because of that we're going to be talking about on future episodes. So, buyers are really getting hit on all fronts. And, to your point about, when the interest rates go up 1% and how affordability decreases, sellers don't understand that. They don't understand what the cost is today, what the actual mortgage payment is today for someone buying their home. I always like to walk through that with the seller. On my mortgage calculator app, I like to say, okay, let's break it down for the buyer audience for your home. They may be putting anywhere between X amount and X amount down. So let's see what that translates to on your asking price. And a lot of times when I do that, they are just sticker shocked because they have no idea. And they certainly, the insurance price they're paying is, based on 10 years ago, most likely. So they're just not even in reality that the insurance today on their home could be double or triple what they've been paying.
And they don't quite understand, they may be paying $2,000 a month or $3,000 a month for their house payment. But when they're going to sell that house, that payment could be $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 a month to the new buyer because it's based on the inflation of the property. And if they're going to put 10, 20, 30% down, whatever that number is, that affects that affordability on the monthly payment. And like we talked about, you've got to add on the insurance. And if it's a condo that has a high HOA, which could be $400, $500, $700 a month, that's loan to value ratios that the lender has to look at when they're approving the loan. So you just keep stacking all this stuff up on top of, trying to sell that property, and you start to lose a certain amount of buyers, which then your house could sit on the house a little bit longer. And if you're overpriced and you need to be at the right price to move it, these are the things that we talk about with the sellers.
Yeah, and pricing today is so important for the market we're in. And the way our industry talks about pricing has to change. It's no longer, what do you think someone will pay for my house? What's it worth? What price would you pay? I mean, those discussions are so 2019, right? I mean, it's more, what price do we need to be talking about, or a price range that's going to generate interest for your home? Otherwise, it's like you said, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a long and painful process. And as you said, I mean, there's buyers for every home in every market, and you can never underprice a house.
No, you're right. You can't underprice it. You can undersell it, but you can't underprice it. And so a lot of times it's hard for sellers to understand that if you have what we call like event pricing, because you can have aspirational, way over the top. You can have market price, which may still not be right. And then you have event pricing, which is a little bit below market price, could be 1%, 3%, 5%. And if that's an attractive property, you're going to drive a lot of buyers to the property. And it kind of gets into a bidding frenzy where you might get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 offers. And then you might actually get your price, Mr. Customer, you're looking for, because you're driving the market to come look at it.
And that's such a hard thing for sellers
It
to,
is.
grasp because they're afraid of losing money. But what they don't realize is by overpricing, their chances of actually losing money are greater than had they underpriced or aggressively priced that home to bid the property up. And time and time and time and again, you've seen it with things you've handled, I have too, that approach is highly successful, and especially in an affordability challenged market like we're in. And, I will just say, stay tuned for more on all of this. We're going to be breaking down all these issues related to pricing, mortgages, title, appraisal, trust and estate issues, probate issues, homeowners insurance issues, natural hazard disclosure reports. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the reckonings that can derail a real estate deal, and hopefully through our podcast, hopefully empower and inform you as a consumer and hopefully prevent it. So our contact information will be in the show notes and ways to reach us. We look forward for you to join us on future episodes, and see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to The Real Estate Reckoning. Make sure you're subscribed and share this episode with someone who needs to hear the truth about buying and selling real estate. We will be back with more reckonings soon.